Good morning, good afternoon, good everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this session. Thank you so much for participating this very important issue session. And this session. My name is Mi Kyung-shin, an education specialist in education sector group in ADB. In this session, we are dealing with cope with the COVID-19, the impact on education. And I'd like to introduce Vignesh, Naidu, the director of the HEAD Foundation. Thank you. The floor is finished.
Thank you very much, Mi Kyung, and good day, everyone. Thank you very much for making the time to join us in this session. And I hope that you will be able to learn something, a little bit about what we are doing at the HEAD Foundation, our very minimal work, our very modest endeavors to try to improve teacher professional development, especially during these very, very trying times. So ladies and gentlemen, my name is Vignesh Naidu, and I am the Director of Operations over here at the HEAD Foundation. Let me share a little bit about who we are at the HEAD Foundation before I share with you and introduce my co-speakers for today's presentation. So the HEAD Foundation is a charitable philanthropic foundation that's based in Singapore. We were established in 2013 with the aim of trying to improve education outcomes in developing Southeast Asia. We work across the region in delivering capacity building opportunities for educators and for school leaders in trying to help them improve not just their pedagogical practices, but also their leadership abilities. Over the last 8 odd years of our existence, we have run a number of training programs, particularly face-to-face training programs. Last year, unfortunately, face-to-face was not a possibility. But in 2019, we very fortunately were able to work with Ateneo de Manila University and the University of Queensland to design and develop a specialized training program for school leaders in the Philippines. And we trained about 20 principals. And you'll hear more about these principles that we train later on when I share about our Making HEADway series. Then 2020 came along, a year that caught all of us by surprise, a year that caught many of us in the education space scrambling to find solutions to this potential learning catastrophe, where our students could find themselves 1, 2, even 5 years behind, a whole generation lost because of the pandemic if we did not respond quick enough. Almost all over the world, there are varying forms of lockdowns and movement restrictions, and many times schools were affected badly by it too. Students were not allowed to go to school in fear that it would lead to spikes in the virus spreading. It could lead to clusters, especially among vulnerable children. And with the ceasing of schooling in person, what did that mean? In many systems, they adapted to online learning. But for other systems, that was a struggle. The infrastructure was certainly not in place. But even as we made this transition, were our educators equipped to teach remotely, whether that's through digital or non-digital means? And that really was something that troubled us at the HEAD Foundation. It was something that we looked at. Being based in Singapore, we're fortunate to see things from a perspective in a country that has over time built up its resources. But even in Singapore, when home-based learning became the norm during what we in Singapore call our circuit breaker, which was basically a lockdown, we realized that many of our friends in the education space did not know how to make this transition to online teaching and learning. They were struggling. Their students were not very certain how to make that transition. So we came up with an innovation, and I'm now going to share a little bit about it as I introduce my participants. As I introduce my co-speakers. So ladies and gentlemen, joining me today, I'm very honored to have 2 co-presenters, Dr. Carmela Oracion, who is the director at the Ateneo Center for Education Development and has been a steadfast partner of the HEAD Foundation, particularly in our Making HEADway series, and Ms. Jasmine Ng. Jasmine is a manager over here at the HEAD Foundation, and she's the one who has taken charge in leading and developing this Making HEADway series and growing it into what it is today. So I've mentioned Making Headway a number of times, but what is this Making Headway series that the Head Foundation has come up with? What makes this unique? What makes this special? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to share with you a quick video that talks about the Making Headway series. What is it all about? And after that, I'll come back with Dr. Carmela to share a little bit more about the series, its genesis, what makes it different, and how we hope that the series can help educators in the region.
In this COVID era, educators face both challenges and opportunities. Terms like learning loss, hybrid schooling, and mental health issues are commonplace. The term Building Back Better suggests that both recovery and innovation strategies are required. Yes, online learning is one solution, but it is insufficient. Teachers will need greater and newer capacities to understand and respond to student needs beyond the academic, strengthen their coping capabilities, and work collaboratively with parents. Students, in turn, will need to be more adaptable, independent, and to be more engaged in the world outside their classrooms. To successfully achieve this shift, we will need to create and empower educator communities to innovate, share, and collaborate to build future-ready education systems. It is in these new times that we should continue to share, innovate, relevant ideas and best practices, and to guide and inspire school leaders and teachers to do the same.
The COVID-19 pandemic made clear the urgent need for customized and contextualized capacity building opportunities for educators across the region. The sector was evolving rapidly, and educators, particularly in Southeast Asia, craved quality training opportunities. The shutdown of air travel meant that the Head Foundation's traditional model of personalized, face-to-face training for educators across the region was simply no longer viable. In our conversation with educators, we saw how many had risen to the challenge and innovated to navigate these uncharted waters. Inspired by them, the Head Foundation conceived, designed, and launched Making Headway. In each webinar series, we invite exemplary school leaders, teachers, and education program staff to share their experiences as well as strategies, tips, and advice around a particular topic. These sharings are captured in our handbooks, which we have translated into Vietnamese, Bahasa Indonesia, and Bahasa Malaysia to reach more educators across the region. And we hope to challenge and motivate educators to find creative, sustainable, and impactful solutions to minimize students' learning loss, support one another, and most importantly of all, take ownership of their own professional development and to continue learning and growing as educators and individuals.
The Making Headway webinar series is exactly what we need in today's complex and uncertain 21st century. It provides an opportunity for educational practitioners to communicate with each other. It promotes collaboration among different education stakeholders, creates a space for educational practitioners as well as some policymakers to critically engage with contemporary issues about education. And most importantly, it plants the seed for the creation of new educational practice and possibly inform educational policy.
It is comforting to see evidence of the education sector's efforts to search for ways to ensure that the young people can continue to be educated in spite of the large-scale disruptions caused by COVID-19. And it is very encouraging to note the deep concern, unwavering resolve, and ingenious resourcefulness of school leaders and teachers, as well as other stakeholders to help all students continue to learn. We from the Philippines are grateful to the HEAD Foundation for the early and prompt response to what can be a learning catastrophe.
Sharing and learning schooling experience together in the new normal through series of handbooks. By handbooks, Vietnamese educators will be able to adapt what their colleges have successfully operated to their schools in COVID-19 context.
The case stories and guides are very relevant and could help anyone working in the education sector to alter our approaches, especially in navigating ourselves throughout this pandemic.
For us all as value educators to remember that we are helping our children, each of them, to build their future. And all this from a journey of many small steps that these led to not only successful outcomes, but I think essentially built up the spirit of the school because the principal and the teachers believed that every student can learn.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed the short video sharing a little bit about what this Making Headway series is all about. So Making Headway is a series that compromises of 3 webinars and a handbook. But what inspired us to do all of this? You can see a photo of people in this slide. And it says below the caption, Certificate in Educational Studies in Leadership 2019. As I shared earlier, the HEAD Foundation was very fortunate that we got to work with the Ateneo Center for Education Development, particularly its director, Dr. Carmela Oracion, to be able to run this program. Now, these are face-to-face programs. In 2018, we worked with our partners in Indonesia, in University Negeri Jakarta. And in 2019, we got to work with our partners in the Philippines to run this program. This is an educational leadership certificate program. And we partner with the University of Queensland in designing and delivering this program. In these face-to-face programs, we got to meet some really inspirational educational leaders. They were running schools, primary, secondary, some were even district heads. And we spoke with them, we stayed in touch, and we built a community of practice. And these leaders were communicating with each other. When the COVID-19 pandemic struck in 2020, we decided at the HEAD Foundation, there'll be a good time to catch up with our participants from our various programs to see how they were coping, what was happening in their countries, what was the situation in their schools, and what we at the HEAD Foundation could do. Let me be very honest here, when the pandemic struck, even us at the HEAD Foundation, we were not certain what is it that we could really do to help our educators across the region navigate this crisis. We're a modest foundation. We could not solve all the technological challenges that many systems may have faced. We were not able to figure out a solution to the virus, but we were thinking, what could we do in a small and meaningful way? So we spoke with these school leaders, every single one you see in this picture. There's a short video of that conversation in the video that I played earlier. And we spoke with them to learn what they were doing to navigate these crises. All of these leaders in this picture are from the Philippines. And we want to understand what are they doing to navigate. And that truly was one of the most inspiring calls I've ever had in my many years at the HEAD Foundation. We got to learn how these leaders, many of whom led schools in less resourced regions of the Philippines, were innovating, were challenging norms, were trying their best to ensure that education continued for their students. That as much as it was possible, they made sure that learning loss was minimized and the students were able to learn. And that inspired us at the foundation because that got us thinking, who knows about these innovations? Are enough people out there sharing what they are innovating in their schools? Are school leaders speaking to each other not just within the Philippines or within specific regions, but were they speaking to each other across the world? We were all facing the same crisis. We were all struggling because most systems adopted a lockdown measure to minimize transmission of the disease, of the virus. But were educators talking to each other? Were they sharing their best practices? And that truly inspired us to think of a way that we at the HEAD Foundation could help share some of that knowledge. And that was the inspiration to Making Headway. As I hand over the next part to Dr. Oracion to share, as an educator, what makes Making Headway a bit different from other teacher professional development programs, especially during this pandemic? I urge you, those of you who are listening in, think about questions that you might want to ask us. Think about things that maybe I would share or Dr. Oracion will share that you may not even agree with. Comments, questions. Think about them, and towards the end, we'll set aside about half an hour to answer your questions. You could do that via the chat function available in the Zoom platform, or if you are comfortable, we can invite you to turn your camera and your microphone on and ask us the question. So Dr. Oracion, would you like to share with our participants, how is it Making Headway is different? As an educator yourself, as a teacher trainer, and as a teacher, what is it about Making Headway that was a bit different as a teacher professional development program?
Thank you very much, Sir Vignesh. Good day, everyone. Dr. Cynthia Rose Bautista of the University of the Philippines and her colleagues once wrote in connection with failed reforms that at the beginning of every school year, print and broadcast media project without fail a perpetual education crisis that mainstreaming of successful reform initiatives could have addressed. There is one explanation I have heard from the ground that rings rather loudly. Hindi po kasi alam ng mga tao sa itaas ang tunay na nangyayari sa ibaba. In English, the people up there do not know what is actually happening on the ground. Very important insight, Vignesh, right? And it's related to our topic. Usually, solutions come from above. And although these may be designed by highly competent and knowledgeable individuals, they are not familiar with the situation on the ground. Making Headway initiatives come from resource persons on the ground. Resource persons on the ground not once upon a time, but at present. Others in similar boats also trying to find their way can relate with them and benefit from their experiences. On this slide are 4 quotes. The first 2 comments describe the webinars as informative in terms of the ideas and experiences shared by the resource persons, and also express that the initiative is responsive to the new situation. The next 2 comments on this slide mention adopting the best practices and also asking questions in the open forum. Adopting hints at action. Asking questions also denotes some level of interest in view of either simply clarifying or understanding better, or understanding better in order to adopt. Thus, I think these comments indicate that Making Headway is a form of professional development that is both a source and an impetus. It is a source of new knowledge and insights, but also an impetus for change and solving problems and making improvements. This twin purpose of serving as a source of ideas, insights, and examples, and providing an impetus for adopting, adapting, applying, or other forms of action motivated us to offer another similar package in November this coming school year. Using the next slide, we would like to say a bit about the three-part live webinar series. It has often been said, as it was said in the introduction a while ago, that the changes in the way we live caused by COVID-19 were unprecedented, immense, and challenging. The situation had major consequences on education, especially basic education, where the teaching-learning process has always been largely face-to-face. Schools had to close, and classes had to stop for a while. The problem was real, and the problem was serious. The situation certainly called for, and maybe even pressed for, relevant and meaningful solutions. Thus, school leaders and educators on the ground quickly began the search for fitting solutions. And the solutions were actually produced. What were these solutions like? They were neither sophisticated nor high-tech, I think. They were simple, innovative responses to the situation, promptly delivered, and context-specific. These initiatives did not start with comprehensive project proposals and endless meetings and funding requirements. The school leaders and teachers at the front lines took advantage of any and whatever resources were available. And the solutions worked. They were not perfect, but they made a difference. You know, some professional development programs, although well-intentioned, do not achieve the intended goals. Sometimes ideas presented are great, but too far up. Sometimes the suggested strategies are very disconnected from the available resources in the schools. But here, we saw strategies that were actually working in spite of the difficult circumstances and very limited resources. I saw how the participants in the Making Headway program have found the sessions beneficial. The initiatives that were shared demonstrate that one, solutions that come from the ground are likely to work in the specific context, and two, those closest to the situation have the answers if they are allowed and guided to find them. The effort of the HEAD Foundation to facilitate the sharing of solutions that work is a concrete way of guiding others in similar situations to explore solutions in a similar manner. The examples of the resource persons serve as models that others can build upon. And that we actually heard from the participants that we had. Sir Vignesh will now say more about this.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oracion. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as Dr. Oracion shared, this webinar series was important that it was driven by educators for educators. Very often, and I think many of us in this room have had to attend professional development programs, whether we are educators, whether we are professionals, we have to attend a variety of professional development programs throughout our careers. Excuse me. Oftentimes, these programs are designed and delivered by decisions made right at the top. Not many of them listen to what is really needed on the ground and how the ideas being shared can be implemented on the ground. It is very important to us to take into account the topics and the ideas that are shared by our participants, by our networks, by educators. What are the challenges they're facing? And another very interesting, and I think what makes Making Headway really innovative, is the regional perspective. We don't just speak to our educators in the Philippines, our friends in the Philippines, or in Indonesia. We speak to friends and educators all around, especially in developing Southeast Asia. We hear about their challenges. We also hear about their innovations. Over the last 3 series, where we've had 9 webinars, we have had speakers from over 6 countries. We've had 9 speakers and 3 moderators, and they come from around 6 countries. We want that diversity of perspectives because the challenges that we face in education, even COVID withstanding, are very, very similar. We want the best for our students, and we face a number of challenges to make sure our students are able to learn in a way that will ensure their own competitive advantage when they enter the workforce and their ability to contribute as meaningful, well-rounded, well-developed members of society. So what has this reach been? We've tried these innovations. Are we really getting through? Are people watching? So in series 1, which we launched last year, we had a total of 863 attendees. And by series 3, which just concluded about a month and a half ago, which Dr. Oracion moderated, we had nearly double the number of attendees. These numbers and the growth has been impressive, and we at the Head Foundation are really proud of what we have done. But it's not enough. There are millions and millions of educators around Southeast Asia and beyond, and across Asia, tens of millions maybe. And we're not reaching as many as we would like. So how can we? These webinars, they're about an hour and a half long each. And each series has 3 webinars. So that's about 4.5 hours of your time to listen to the webinars. We do provide highlight videos, about 45 minutes long. We do subtitle it right now, only in Bahasa Indonesia, but we are open to subtitling in other languages if partners are keen to work with us. But even with this, the recordings are up on YouTube. Yes, the video numbers are there. They help to educate. They help to give our audience an opportunity to learn from other educators, able to listen to the innovations that they have implemented. But is it really that sustainable change, or what more can we do? So we tried to increase our reach by line extending our products. What more can we do? So as I shared earlier, we have a highlight video in Bahasa Indonesia. But the second thing that we did out of this Making Headway, the second key component of this series is our handbooks. Our handbooks are used to consolidate the information that has been shared during the webinars. All 3 of them. It's meant to document what are the innovations and best practices that these educators have shared. What are the key changes that they have made in their systems? What have they tried in their school? What has worked? And more importantly, what has not? Right? How can our educators utilize these handbooks? How can they try this in their school? What are the step-by-step process of innovating this? And once again, me as an administrator, I'm not in the best place to share more about this, but Dr. Oracion as an educator can share about how the handbook brings across this perspective that helps educators be able to utilize it in a manner that can really be transformative, in a manner that can have an impact on their education system. Dr. Oracion, would you like to share a little bit as an educator? What makes this handbook unique? What makes this handbook special, and how can this handbook potentially be transformational for the user?
Before the pandemic, professional development activities were mostly face-to-face. They took the form of either further studies or pursuit of degrees, or in-service seminars and workshops. I would like to say that the Making Headway initiative is actually a comprehensive professional development package that has been possible even during the pandemic. The handbooks serve as supplements to the webinars. The webinars can be hello and goodbye activities, but we provided the handbooks as supplements to help the participants reflect more upon the insights from the sessions that were led by the resource persons, inspire them to apply the examples in their own context, and direct them to related resources. The handbook is important because, school leaders and teachers, as we educators know, are very busy people. And we cannot go to the other sources, or we cannot reflect upon what we learn from a certain activity, post-activity, right after. The intention is for the materials in the handbooks to help educators understand the examples more thoroughly when they have the chance to go over these and be motivated to access further ideas. Hopefully, those who will have the chance to get hold of these handbooks will be encouraged to search for similar solutions that have been presented by the resource persons and solutions that will more likely work in their context. And bonus, the handbook is available in both soft and printed forms. And that's helpful, especially for very busy people. If I may share with you, the participants in the Philippines who received copies of the handbooks were very happy when they received their copies. And they have actually shared with us that they have gone through the contents of the handbook and they tried working on the different activities that were incorporated in the handbook. The handbook is not just for reading. There are activities inside. There are directions for accessing related resources. And this, the participants were able to do. Come to think of it, the professional development package consisting of a webinar series plus a handbook is not a sophisticated enterprise. But I must say it is groundbreaking. It is cutting edge. School leaders and teachers who are close to the ground, especially those who are in extremely challenging situations, automatically search for answers that suit their context. The resource persons who have been featured succeeded to address what could have been a catastrophic education gap. It is very thoughtful and ingenious, I must say, of the HEAD Foundation to come up with this simple but trailblazing project. So thank you very much for that, Sir Vignesh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oracion. And as you shared, I think the handbook was a very important and a very exciting endeavor for us at the HEAD Foundation, working with our moderators such as yourself and working with our speakers. It was something different. We at the HEAD Foundation have produced publications over the years. We have worked with the ADB to produce working papers and academic publications. But one thing we realized over the years was academic publications serve a purpose, a very important purpose in society as it pushes policy development in certain directions. But when you talk to educators on the ground, they want to know, what can I do now? I have these problems in my school. I have these challenges. How can I solve them immediately? I'm keen to understand and learn the theory, but right now I need to figure out how to solve it. And that's the way we really structured this handbook. We try to lean a little bit less on the theory, really focus on what is the practical implementation that they can do, right? We bring in case studies because that makes it relatable. That shows that these things are operatable. They can be realized in a school, even in a less resourced context. We provide, even for the educators, extra resources. If we discuss a certain issue, we may provide QR codes and links that can allow them the opportunity, if they want to read deeper, they want to hear what others are doing. We at the HEAD Foundation do not own all the knowledge on how to solve the education problems, neither do all our speakers. We have a limited number of people that we can invite to speak. We have certain constraints. But there are innovations. So we bring that into our handbooks too. We provide links so that people can go on to read about others that maybe we just didn't have the ability to include in a specific handbook. And I think what we really want this to be is a sort of timeless take-home resource, something that an educator can refer to, something that hopefully they leave on their shelf in their office or their home. And once in a while, when they face a challenge, they pick it up. They read about the case studies, the innovations. They look at the resources available. They look at the tips. How do you go about implementing? How do you go about building a positive school culture, a culture of learning? These are things that we have unpacked. We talk so much that schools are places of learning, but how do you ensure a positive learning environment? How do you build that culture of learning in a school? We unpack some of this in our handbook. And that is really what makes our handbook unique. But before I open the floor for questions, I think one of the things is, how do you really use these handbooks, right? They're different, they're innovative. And if you have a chance, do visit our website, the link I will share later on. You can download these handbooks for free. They're openly and readily available. Let me just share quickly this little short clip about how can we as educators utilize this handbook. So ladies and gentlemen, I pretty much come to the end of our presentation. But before I end, I would like to make a short call to action to those of you who are attending our program and our session today. Making Headway is an innovation that the HEAD Foundation talked about. It's an innovation that the HEAD Foundation has been so fortunate to be able to implement with fantastic partners such as the Ateneo Center for Educational Development, Hue University in Vietnam. And it's something that we believe could be transformational. We believe that Making Headway could be a product that would allow educators in the region to learn from fellow educators, not just in their own context, in their own country, in their own school, but learn across the region. The challenges and problems that are facing us in the education space, particularly in the school education space, are not unique. They cut across countries, they cut across communities, they cut across cultures. And we are looking for partners to help us grow the reach of our product. We are looking for partners to help us also grow the depth of our product, to share with us some of the learnings and experience from your own communities and your own cultures, experiences and learnings that would impact and be transformational for others. So reach out to us. There's an email address there, and let us know if you'd like to work. We are keen to explore the possibility of subtitling other videos. Our videos, particularly our highlight videos, in more languages than Bahasa Indonesia. But unfortunately, we are not able to do that on our own. But if we have partners, institutional partners, we'll be happy to work with you to get these videos out so that they can reach more people. And the same with our handbook. Currently, we have it in Vietnamese, in Bahasa Malaysia, and Bahasa Indonesia, along, of course, with English. The translations are done by our partners, and we're always on the lookout for partners who would be keen to work with us to potentially translate it into more languages. Also, the dissemination of our handbooks. E-copies are available for free on our website. Go by, download them, share them with your friends. If schools would like hard copies, we can arrange to have them sent at a small fee to cover our costs. And please do reach out to us if you'd like to receive hard copies. Ladies and gentlemen, I've come to the end of my sharing, and I would like to hear from all of you in the audience. What are your perspectives? How can we do things better? What would you like to know more about our Making Headway series? And what would you like to know? And as I invite questions from the floor, I'd like to also invite my colleague. As Dr. Oracion said, part of this may be trailblazing, but the real trailblazer is my colleague who runs and manages this program, Ms. Jasmine Ng, to join us in our question and answer session. So ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, can I invite you to raise your hand and I'll call on your name. And if you're comfortable, turn on your camera and your microphone and ask us a question. Alternatively, you may write some questions in the chat box and we'll do our best to answer them. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Yes, I think, do we have any questions coming in from the floor, from our moderators? I may not be able to see this very clearly. If our friends in ADB, Ian, if you could just help if there are any questions that we could answer.
As of the moment, there's no questions in the chat box. So just wait for them to enter the questions. You can type into our chat box your questions to our speakers. Don't be shy, or you can open your microphone to ask questions directly.
So there's a question I see from John. All right, I see a few questions coming up. Okay, so I see a question from John. What were the previous assistance given by the organization aside from the materials or handbooks provided? As I shared, the HEAD Foundation has, one of the main things that we do in the region is that we deliver capacity building programs. We design some of our own programs and we work with educators, we work with teacher trainers, we work with academics, thought leaders to deliver some of these capacity building programs. So for example, we've worked with Dr. Carmela in the Ateneo Center. We've also worked with Dr. Vicente Reyes from the University of, now he's presently at University of Nottingham. He was previously at the University of Queensland. And collaboratively, our three institutions work together to deliver a certificate in educational studies and leadership for Filipino educators. Right now, we are school leaders. And right now, we're actually working on seeing how we can transform that program, which was done in a hybrid model with about 4 face-to-face sessions. And we're trying to see if we are able to we're able to bring that program to a fully online model. So that's one of the programs. We also run higher education leadership programs with various centers, including CMEO centers in the region. Please do drop by our website. You can find out a bit more about it. I'll come to the next question. I think there was a request about the possibility to translate in Tagalog. Please reach out to us, headway@headfoundation.org, and we can take the conversation from there. How about self-care workshops for educators? Have you done anything on emotional and psychological wellness for educators, especially during the pandemic? I think that's an extremely important question. If any of you follow Singapore education developments, you know that even in our parliament, there's recently been a lot of discussion about the mental well-being of students and educators, particularly during this very trying time of the pandemic. We have not specifically touched on it in one of our series. We have only run 3 series. But during each of the series, we did touch quite a fair bit on social emotional development and on psychological wellness. We would like to delve quite further into it in a dedicated session about the psychological emotional wellness of educators and of students during this difficult time. But if you were to refer to our first handbook, particularly Educational Leadership in a Crisis, can be found on our website, you would see that quite a fair bit of the discussions in there also talked about educators looking after themselves. You know how it is with educators. You put the student first, you put the child first. And often at times you do all you can to help them and to navigate through the crisis and help them navigate through the crisis and put your own mental health at risk. So we do discuss a little bit of it in our first and even in our second book about building a positive school culture. So you could take a look. But if you'd like to work with us on exploring how we could potentially do a series dedicated to emotional psychological wellness for educators, please reach out to us then, headway@headfoundation.org, and we'll be happy to take the conversation from there. There's a question from Nori. What can we do to listen to the government in the field of education? Seems like they don't really listen, or maybe listening only to what they want to hear. Our suggestions are only just but a figment of ideas, but less in urgent action. So if I may, I believe you're asking, how can you get policymakers to hear what educators are talking about on the ground and what educators are suggesting and how it's impacting? Dr. Oracion, would you like to share a little bit as an educator? Do you have some tips and suggestions? How do you get policymakers to hear?
Well, I think the policymakers are also so up there and they're very, very busy with many other things. So I think my own suggestion would be to do whatever you can within your sphere of influence, no? And maybe work with the government leaders who are there. So that would mean the division leaders of the different divisions for the Philippines, or maybe the local governments, and see if things can be achieved. You know, I think things have to bear fruit so that they can be recognized, no? On the other hand, I think that we have to learn about the red flag mechanism. I mean, if things really get to be impossible, then we should also be able to raise the red flag. But we should know where to raise the red flag. And I think that the immediate environment should be, no, where we can propose suggestions, show cases that work, as well as ask for help, no, if necessary. We saw that, Vignesh and Jasmine, in our different sessions, right? When the different resource persons shared with us how they reached out to even the, what do you call that, the military, you know, and then the local government officials.
Yeah, I think one of the most inspiring stories we heard was during our last session when an educator in Indonesia was talking about how his school had very poor internet connectivity and bandwidth, and his innovative solution was to work with the Air Force that had a base not too far away. You rarely ever think about the military and education in the same breath, but they did. It worked out well. The military and the Air Force were happy to help. They made available, they had computers that were working and working well. They had bandwidth, obviously with certain precautions put in place. They made that available so students could learn online. Students were given the resources because they worked with. So sometimes it's about thinking out of the box. I think very few educators would think, let's go approach the military and see if they can help us with education. I have a few more questions. I have one that I think, Jasmine, maybe you could share a little bit about your perspectives on this. I know you've been thinking deeply about it. There's a question from Johannes, and I do sincerely apologize if I pronounce any of your names wrongly. The question goes, many teachers also experience challenges with internet connectivity. What are options available for them if they can't access online resources or webinars?
Okay, so for now, we have, as Vignesh has mentioned, we have live webinars and handbooks. So handbooks come in both digital format and also hard copies. And currently we're exploring to produce digital offline products. So such as our videos, you want to put it in thumb drives and sending it to schools, and also probably working with companies or governments who already have mobile apps that use offline, digital offline content. So if you are working in these companies, or if you know anyone who run these apps, you can introduce us to them, and we hope to share our resources in the digital offline format to reach more teachers who don't have internet access. Yeah.
Thank you, Jasmine. There's a quick question here from Edison, whether the programs offered is for education teachers and not only leaders. Yes, especially Making Headway. It's not just for school leaders, it's for everybody working in education, everybody in the school. You know, the sharings that you can find in our handbooks and in the recordings that are available on YouTube, they're not just for leaders, they're for everyone, because each and every one of us are important in making the change. So do check it out. It's not specifically for school leaders. And I believe you're from the Novacia School Division, which I think we've had a number of participants joining us from Novacia. So do check out the resources available on our website. There are a few questions here. Okay, from Yumiko. Teachers' roles are changing from teaching in classrooms to facilitating personalized learning for students. What is the strongest request coming out from teachers at your webinars to help transform themselves during the ongoing and beyond crisis? Jasmine, would you like to share a little bit about the perspectives we have been hearing from our participants?
Yeah, okay. So in June and July, we ended our third webinar series, and based on our the questions that our participants have asked and also the feedback we have received, we found that a lot of them, they wanted to know more about classroom management and also assessment. So we are listening to the voices of the teachers and the educators out there, and in our next series, which will happen in November, we'll be touching on these topics. So if you're interested, you can just leave your email and send it to headway@headfoundation.org, and then when the invitations are open, we will send an email to you to register for the session.
Yep, and I think Zen, that will answer your question also. Do we have any scheduled public webinars next month? Yes, we are planning our fourth Making Headway series in November. So do drop us a line and we will reach out, and we'll make sure that you get the flyer when it's ready. Flyers are not ready yet, so we are unable to tell you more, but the dates are pretty much available. I'll quickly share the slide on that. There is a question to Dr. Oracion. Do you think Department of Education has done its part in delivering K-12 education effectively, especially during the pandemic? Were the modalities used maximized to facilitate learning?
K-12 was just taking off when the pandemic hit us. And then I personally think that the Department of Education is exerting great effort to ensure that teaching learning processes continue, that the goals of the K-12 reform are pursued even during the pandemic. And this is the Department of Education on the national level as well as the local levels. However, if I may say this now, the problem we face is really huge. No, I mean, we know that I mentioned a while ago the notion that reforms have not succeeded to get us off the ground, as far as initiatives are concerned. Then also, in a country where most of our public schools really face very challenging circumstances, the problems cannot be confined to instructional considerations. So like, for example, consider the different modalities now, say modular, for example, or even online. We need the parents of the children to help them with their studies as they go through their lessons at home. But it's not so simple. How can this be done in homes where the parents themselves never completed elementary education? So it's very complex. So my answer to your question is yes, I think effort is being exerted on different levels, but I would like to say that more needs to be done if we want to get the K-12 goals off the ground, and we must help one another. And helping means doing our share in our schools, engaging in partnerships, which is an important theme of our previous webinar, partnerships among one another, as well as with private organizations, including those who are not directly related to education. So there, Vignesh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oracion. I think there's a question here, if the teacher development program we are conducting has in the Philippines have Department of Education advisory. So I think to answer that, the programs we conduct.
That, no?
Sorry?
We're trying.
Yeah, we're working
right?
towards that, exactly that. So Dr. Oracion and my colleague Jasmine and our team, we are working towards seeing if we can obtain the advisory from the Department of Education. And not just the Department of Education in the Philippines, but we're also looking to see if we can obtain advisories and recognition for the program from other departments of education and ministries of education across the region as part of a professional development for their educators. There's also a question from Kriti here. Appears to be a great program. What is the efficacy so far? To be very honest, we don't really understand. We don't really know how effective the program has been. And this is because we have only completed 3 of these series. It's been done over a condensed period of about 8 months. We just completed the 3rd one. The 3rd handbook is yet to be published. So we are planning to do a comprehensive study on efficacy of the program towards the start of next year, the first quarter of 2022, where we hope to be able to work with our partners in the Ateneo Center, together with our partners in Hue University and our other partners across the region, to try to understand the effectiveness and the efficacy of this program, both the webinar plus the handbook. So we hope to be able to give a better response to this maybe in next year, the 10th ADB Skills Forum, which hopefully we are able to all meet in person and discuss this. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have time for maybe another question, a question or two. Would anybody like to ask a question? Maybe you could turn your mic on and ask your question. If not, do we have anyone? Okay, so I don't think we have a hand raised from Edison, I see. Would you like to ask a question, Edison?
Thank you for recognizing me to speak. My question is there any post-program or best post-program activity from the completers of the programs by the HEAD Foundation? And if so, can you please share to us what are those post-program activities? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much for your question, Edison. I think that's a fantastic question and it's very important. So as I shared, we have run a number of face-to-face training programs. And based on those face-to-face training programs, we have a better understanding of the post-program implementations and innovations that our participants have done. And a lot of these innovations are actually what inspired Making HEADway. Now, after Making HEADway, the numbers and the scale that it is, we do not know a lot about the innovations that may be implemented. And I think this ties to the efficacy question. But maybe Dr. Oracion or Jasmine, you might like to share a little bit about some of the innovations that we have observed from participants of our Certificate in Educational Studies in Leadership course in 2019.
I would also like to say, Vignesh, that the participants continue to pursue their professional development with us in terms of serving as resource persons in our webinars. No, I mean, we don't want their training to stop at the completion of the program that they participated in. So we continue to engage them. As Sir Vignesh mentioned a while ago, we gathered them as a professional learning community to give us feedback. And then we had actually invited several of them to speak in our webinars. So for them as well, this is a continuing professional development. Jasmine, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, so earlier on we mentioned the Certificate in Educational Studies in Leadership. And in this program, each of the participants, they have to sort of develop and implement a transformational action project. So it can be anything that they want to do to improve their schools. And then during our catch-up sessions a year later, a lot of them are still continuing to implement this project, their own project, even though COVID happened. So they tried to innovate and move things online. So instead of having face-to-face discussions, they moved their PLCs online. And then a lot of them, they even started their own PLCs and own sort of coaching groups so that so for some teachers who are not very familiar with technology, so they created their own groups to sort of like practice and prepare before their lessons. So these are all small innovations. So we don't have any sort of concrete evidence yet, but we are just hearing from our participants from the ground what they've been doing. Yeah.
Okay, and then on that note, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for attending this session. I hope you found the session to be meaningful. I hope you found the session to be a useful session, something that you could learn a little bit from. And most importantly, I hope the session inspired you as educators, as leaders, as professionals in the education sector to understand the importance of teacher professional development, especially during these trying times, and to work with your educators through platforms such as Making HEADway to improve their practice, to be able to help them grow as educators and individuals so that their students would be able to enjoy the best quality education available to them. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being a part of this. And thank you very much to the Asian Development Bank for inviting the HEAD Foundation to share its little contribution to the teacher professional development space, particularly during this COVID-19 pandemic. I encourage each of you to join tomorrow's session, the third day of the 9th International Skills Forum organized by the Asian Development Bank. And I urge you to visit our website. I'll put it up a little bit for just a quick second. I'm going to share our website and provide our email address again. Sorry, only our email address is here. Our website's not on this slide. But nonetheless, this is our email address. Do reach out to us. If you'd like to know more information about upcoming webinars, reach out to us. Let us know. We'll add you to our list. If you'd like to find ways to collaborate, work with us. As I said, we are always looking for speakers to share their innovations. We're always looking for opportunities to increase the reach of our products. That could be through subtitled videos, that could be through translated handbooks. Please do reach out to us. But on that note, I'd like to thank everyone once again for being a part of it. Especially, I'd like to thank Dr. Carmela Oracion, a stalwart partner of the HEAD Foundation, who has contributed meaningfully throughout our endeavors to improve education, to improve the opportunities for educators in their professional development journey across the region. And to my colleague Jasmine, who is the innovator behind this series. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and may you have a pleasant day, a pleasant evening. Goodbye.
Thank you, sir.